It's the holiday season and we're working on our holiday baking. Our recipe for pizzelles makes way more than we need, so we want to see if cutting a recipe in half is really the same as dividing it by 2. Well, let's start by multiplying all of our ingredients in half. First, we need 12 eggs. Well, to multiply 12 by 1/2, I need to make 12 into a fraction, so it becomes 12 over 1. Now we can multiply our numerators together, multiply our denominators together, have 12 over 2, and then we can simplify that to 6, so we're going to need 6 eggs. For our next ingredient, we have 4 cups of flour. Well, again, I need to make that into 4 over 1 so I can multiply it by 1/2. So now I can multiply my numerators together, multiply my denominators together. That gives me 4 over 2, and that simplifies to 2 cups of flour that we'll need. On our next ingredient, we have 1 cup of butter. Well, 1 is our multiplicative identity. Anything multiplied by 1 is itself. So 1 times 1/2 now means we're now going to need a 1/2 cup of butter. On our next 2 ingredients, we're going to need 1½ cups of sugar and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. So we need to multiply 1½ times 1/2. When we multiply a mixed number by a fraction, I need to turn it into an improper fraction. So 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. So that gives me 3 over 2 that I'm then going to multiply by 1/2. Multiply my numerators, multiply my denominators, and that gives me 3/4. So I'm going to need 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and then we're going to need 3/4 of a teaspoon, that's what the lowercase t is for, of baking powder. For our last ingredient, we need 1 teaspoon of anise oil. Well, that brings us back to our multiplicative identity. 1 times 1/2 is simply 1/2, so that's a 1/2 teaspoon of anise that we're going to need. Now, if you're like me and you don't really like the flavor of anise, you can substitute in something like vanilla instead, but again, that's up to you and your personal preference.